Hi guys, it's Zara with ZaraPhD.com, and I am here today with a quick tip. So I was talking to my husband about transferable skills, specifically this idea that I have a degree that I never use, right? So I've been trained in neurobiology, right? I was trained to write grants. I was trained to write biomedical research articles. I was trained to lecture in a college setting. I was trained to do laboratory research. And when we were in grad school, we used to joke, especially as we got closer and closer to our graduation, about how we could translate our somewhat obscure laboratory skills into marketable skills that would be appropriate for a resume. So, for example, we would say things like, has experience with complex protocols and can follow detailed instructions, instead of has experience with cell culture and sterile technique, right? Because very few people need someone who knows sterile technique. And I would argue that I do use sterile technique at sometimes as a mother with dirty diapers and cooking and things like that. I'm highly aware of what's contaminating what. But beyond that, our skills are transferable. And this doesn't just apply to me, it applies to all of us. Like, my training is probably very different from yours, but I firmly believe that we gain these experiences throughout life, and it does make us better at what we do from that point forward, especially in these sort of intangible ways, like being able to follow instructions. And so we used to joke about it as grad students, and the more obscure the laboratory skill, the harder we would laugh about trying to translate it into something that could be put on a good resume. But I was talking to my husband and I said, there's one skill that I use that I'm pretty sure came from my training as a scientist, and I use it every day, and it makes our life so much simpler. And that is, I ask why. So I'm going to give you this little tip today because I think it's a skill that you can start implementing as well to make all sorts of aspects of life simpler. So scientists are trained ultimately to ask questions and to solve problems. And in order to do that, they break their big questions down into smaller questions. And they do that by asking why. I want to know why this happens. Okay, it happens because this and this are interacting. Well, why are they interacting? Or why are they interacting incorrectly? And then why again? And so they ask why along that train of thought as long as they need to, until they get to something that is small enough to understand or experiment on. Right? And so we can do the same thing in our life. We ask why and why and why again until we get to something that is small enough that we can understand it or we can address it easily. And this is how we simplify life. So I bring this up because I see a lot of people who stress about these big chunks of life, right? They're concerned about homeschooling, or they're struggling with marriage, or they're struggling with a relationship, or homemaking, sorry. And they are seeing it at a very macroscopic level. And my suggestion would be to ask why. Why is it an issue? And then why again? And then why is that happening? And why is that so? And continue to ask why until you really get to the root of the problem, right? So when scientists study cancer, they don't say, I just study all of cancer. No, there are certain scientists studying different aspects of cancer because there are a lot of moving parts, and the questions are actually in the details, right? So cancer in and of itself is not a terrible thing. The problem with cancer is how it interferes with life, how it interferes with normal physiology. And also the question about cancer is what went wrong for cancer to develop. And so we can do the same thing with our homeschool, for example. The problem isn't just homeschooling. The problem may be how homeschool is interfering with our life, or what went wrong to make homeschooling go down the tubes to begin with. And so we want to be asking really more specific questions. And big problems often are not these big, huge chunks of life. They're in the smaller details and in the moving parts. And so that's empowering, right? Because it's a lot easier, first of all, to address a small question or a small problem than it is to think that this huge chunk of our life needs addressing. But also it's reassuring and comforting to know that this big chunk of our life doesn't actually need addressing. It's in the details. And so big problems require small questions. And so as you're going through life and you want to simplify things, that would be my tip to you. Don't just look at the big macroscopic picture, but get microscopic and ask why, and ask why again, and ask why some more. And I have inadvertently taught this to my children, I realized, and I would encourage you also, if you're a homeschooling mother, when you're talking about the scientific method or how scientists think, to include this really important part, which is scientists address the small parts first and they build on that knowledge. They say, what do we know? What do we not know? And how do we build so that eventually we know it all? But we are never going to all of a sudden in one experiment figure it all out. And if we tried to do that as scientists, or when we try to do that as human beings, it gets really messy. You throw everything against the wall. You have very vague hypotheses about what's even going on to begin with. And then you try it all, right? You do all the experiments and all the things. Well, now you have so many variables that you can't draw any valid conclusions from your results. So all that time has been unproductive. And we see this when people say, my house is a mess. And instead of asking why, well, nobody picks anything up. Okay, why don't they pick anything up? Well, because they don't have time. Okay, why don't they have time? Well, because we've jam-packed our schedule way too full. And now the solution is, okay, I need to take a good look at how we're spending our time. And maybe I need to dial back on some of that. Or maybe I need to just build in housekeeping better into our routine. And that's very different than going out and buying all the bins and all the boxes and spending weekends decluttering when the problem is actually a time issue, right? So this is just an example where asking why can make addressing the problem so much simpler. If you don't ask why and you just say, my house is a mess, and you go out and you buy all the things and you get all the cleaners and you have these all out, drag out, decluttering, cleaning sessions because you just need to get it done, well, the problem's going to come back. And you've spent a whole lot of time and energy on things that were not actually the problem, and money on things that were not actually the problem. And so I think we complicate our lives when we assume things are complicated, right? And so make it simple. And the most elegant science experiments that answer the biggest questions in science are the simplest. And so I think, too, that the most elegant solutions in life are going to be the simple ones. So that's my advice today. Break it down until it's something small. Ask why, ask why, ask why some more. And then address what is really at the root of the problem. And don't stress about these big chunks of life being completely out of order, because that's probably not the case. So if you enjoyed this and you want to know when I put out more videos, go ahead and subscribe down there right now. You can also go to the blog. It's www.zaraphd.com, and I write there about simplifying life and minimalist homeschooling and natural wellness. So I hope you'll enjoy the posts there. I also have a Facebook group for minimalist homeschooling. That's where all the homeschooling moms gather who are trying to achieve a simple and minimal homeschool specifically. And that is at facebook.com/groups/minimalist homeschooling Zara. I also have a Facebook page where I will post all of this new content and funny memes and things like that. And that's facebook.com/minimalist homeschooling. So I hope I'll see more of you at one of those locations. And in the meantime, I am wishing you all of the simple things. Have a great day.